Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Justin Ferry on behalf of KMJ Consulting. We'd like to welcome you to the RITIS User Group web meeting. We have a little bit of housekeeping items that we'll go over, and then we'll get started. There are two ways you can join the audio. Hopefully, if you're hearing this, you don't need any help, but you can always dial in. That number is also in the email that you received from Zoom. We are recording this meeting. It'll be posted to the Coalition YouTube page. If you have any technical questions, please email Esther Cleet at ecleet@kmjinc.com. Today, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. We will answer them live if time permits. If not, you'll get a text response from the presenter. And again, we're using the Q&A box, and you can keep track of your questions using the My Questions tab in that box. If we have time, we may be able to have people ask questions verbally. If you want to do so, please raise your hand, and we can unmute you at that time. With that, I'd like to introduce Cheryl Bradley from the Eastern Transportation Coalition. Hi, Cheryl.
Great. Thank you all. And I appreciate it today. We've got a great agenda, so we're going to jump right into things. Next slide. Just some things that have been happening or are coming up soon. We did have our Waves and third-party mapping working group in June. Some great conversation out of that. We've also, of course, have our RITIS user groups, and you can see there the agenda for the next few, October 3rd, February 6th, and May 1st. We do have some ongoing efforts where we are working with data providers and with our states to talk about bridge strikes and what we can do to kind of mitigate that risk of those major incidents that tend to have significant consequences to areas and even the region when we have to shut down large portions of the interstate. TDM, we have combined our point of contact and our technical advisory group into one now called the TDM Leadership Group. We are in the process of doing some ancillary product reviews for that, and hopefully we'll have some even more exciting products available through that platform for our member states soon. And then in the fall, we will be kicking off our highway operations group meetings. Those are in person, done on a regional basis, and that's our opportunity to talk about the things that impact us most from an incident management perspective. Next slide. You can see here today we've got a great representation across the country. We're excited to have all of you involved, and from a combination of DOTs, MPOs, different transportation authorities, federal agencies, local agencies, and universities. So thank you. Next slide. One exciting piece of news that came about last month is West Virginia joined the Eastern Transportation Coalition. So you can see that our logo is nicely filled out there and no longer has that little gap in the middle. So we're thrilled to have them on board and looking forward to all that they bring to the table. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Glasser. He is as you see here, the National TSM&O lead for Arcadis, and he is our co-chair for the group. Prior to this, Matt worked at GDOT and was a great contributor to their data efforts as well. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Cheryl. Well, let's get into it. I think you've already done a wonderful job laying the groundwork for me. So let's just walk through our agenda, and I'll get our speaker bios here shortly. As Cheryl just ran through, we had some wonderful coalition updates. We have two spotlight presentations we'd like to present today. One from Ryan Knapp for the Vermont Agency of Transportation's use of RITIS for their daily operations. And then Greg Jordan talking about the post-eclipse analysis that he also did in conjunction with the Vermont Agency of Transportation. Shortly after those two, we'll hear from Michael Pack just on some updates for RITIS, as well as some major updates to those tools. Bob Frey from MassDOT will be talking about the RITIS Product Enhancement Working Group, where that is, and then we'll do some nice wrap up as well as feedback from you guys. Next slide, please. So let's walk through our speakers today. As always, we have Michael Pack, the director of the CATT lab. He's been working as mentioned, he is the director of the CATT lab at the University of Maryland, where he works to make transportation data more easily accessible and usable by ops, planners, and researchers. He has previously worked at the University of Virginia and the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Greg Jordan also works at the University of Maryland CATT lab. Before joining the CATT lab, Greg managed a helicopter survey company that conducted 80 origin, destination, and routing surveys using aerial video to trace vehicles. He also used the helicopter results to validate the use of INRIC's trip paths data for origin destination surveys. Greg has drawn from these experiences to design new capabilities and features for the trips analytics tools that we use daily. Ryan Knapp is the ITS section chief for the Vermont Agency of Transportation. Employed by VTrans for 13 years, Ryan is responsible for managing ITS projects and overseeing the TMC. For VTrans emergency response operations, he assumes the role of situation unit leader for the TMC, liaising between the TMC and the Transportation Incident Command Center. And last but certainly not least is Bob Frey, Director of Public-Oriented Planning in the Office of Transportation Planning for Massachusetts DOT. Bob has worked in a variety of roles at MassDOT's planning office for more than 2 decades. Most recently, one of his focus areas has been vehicle probe and GPS data, as he manages MassDOT's RITIS contract and has participated in various coalition meetings for the last several years. Next slide, please. So before we get started, let's go ahead and hop into a few polls that they'll be pulled up. And we'll do all 3 of these in quick conjunction. First, as always, is how often do you attend RITIS user group meetings? 1 to 2 times per year, 3 to 4 times per year, and this is my first meeting. The second question, how do you use the data and visualization results from RITIS? Do you use it directly for RITIS to develop products such as reports, maps, or do you download the data, use your own agency's in-house tools and create tables and visuals for product development, or you do a little bit of both? And finally, who is the primary audience for sharing information that was developed from RITIS and the PDA suite? Is it peers, management, executive leadership, elected officials, or the general public? We'll leave that open for a few more seconds before we close it out, waiting for that to slow down. And Justin, perhaps you can give us a countdown as you're seeing the results slow down.
Sure, Esther. I think you can close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. First up was how often do you attend RITIS user group meetings? It's always a nice balance, but this time certainly seeing the regulars attend. Very excited to see the 3 to 4 times per year folks show up, but most certainly welcome the individuals that this is your first meeting attended. Certainly a big welcome to our team members from West Virginia, and certainly the team members across the country. That it's great to see the expansion out beyond the coalition's footprint. For how the visualizations are used, we're continuing to see that number increase of 60%, doing a little bit of both. That's awesome to see, and a nice balance across the board for the primary audience of RITIS and PDA. So let's go ahead and hop to the next portion. And with that, Ryan, I'm going to cue you up for your presentation.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. And thank you for having me. Thanks for the introduction. So today I'm going to be walking through our use of RITIS for our operations and keying in on a big event that we experienced here in April 8th for the total solar eclipse. And next slide. Thank you. So the background here is important. I want to set the stage by expanding on a few things that are not RITIS related which is a traffic model that our researchers at the University of Vermont did for us. So this was in the works months in advance of this known disruption to mobility in Vermont. So we worked closely with the researchers at UVM, and they leveraged existing traffic data that we have from our ITS program. And we use, of course, the path of totality as a guide in terms of where we can make educated assumptions in terms of where people who are visiting Vermont would visit during the eclipse or for the eclipse. So there's a certain level of assumptions being made, but most of it was grounded, in data or other observations that have been made for other events. So what we knew, given the path of totality, is that the visitors would be concentrated in the northern part of a state, and specifically, skewed to the northeast part of the state, based on the path of totality. And what we learned, in the days leading up to this event, due to the forecasting, was that the forecast played a role in what we saw on the ground the day of, due to cloudy skies, and sort of pushing perhaps people into Vermont that otherwise would have stayed, home to witness the event, but otherwise would have been cloud covered. So we used, based on our data, we plugged in these assumptions again of 160,000 visitors on the day of, with a rate of 2.8 visitors per vehicle. That's how we came to this 60,000 estimated vehicle number. And again, we're expecting widespread congestion in the north, with an expected mass exodus immediately after the event. And sort of to frame this for you again, and again, going back to the travel model, the assumptions that we made were that people would visit the state, come here for the event at different times, whether they were piggybacking off from a week-long vacation or making a weekend out of it. And then, of course, you're going to get a large number of visitors that were strictly coming here the day of just to witness the event. So that sort of, that was the foundation for the buildup. Coming to the state is not going to look the same as once the event's over and there's many people that are leaving the state all at the same time. During these events like this, and the fact that we knew it was coming, we activated what we call our incident command system for the Agency of Transportation, which is more or less a group of executive leaders that have different roles as far as logistics and planning. And we have a commander that's calling the shots, but it puts us all in the same room to make these system-wide or high-level decisions that then bleed down to our folks that are on the roads, our maintenance workers, so that we have this common operating picture. Everyone knows what's going on, where it's happening, when it's happening. So it's a structure that we spin up for these larger events to help us manage them in real time. Next slide, please. So this top piece is important because as we evaluated the traffic model and the assumptions that we made, we wanted to make this point very clear to leadership, to our stakeholders, both internal and external, that the traffic was going to be so great that we knew there was going to be gridlock on our major routes. We knew it was going to be bumper to bumper. There just was not going to be enough capacity to keep traffic flowing at normal speeds. And so we were trying to temper expectations, because you can probably relate to this, but usually when something happens out there on the roads, somebody wants to know what we're going to do about it. How do we mitigate the problem? How do we get traffic moving again? And in this case, there were so many cars everywhere that really the only solution is time. We had to let things play out. So our goals were really centered around awareness of what was happening out there, where the congestion was, when it would start to alleviate, how it built leading up. So again, this is where I go back to this term common operating picture, which is a single point of truth of how we're all viewing the incident that we're dealing with, which was mass congestion, more or less statewide. So from here, once we had the model built and we were trying to determine, what was our common operating picture going to look like? How are we going to present this information to our leadership, to our stakeholders, so that we are all on the same page and we all knew what was going on. So this is when we turned to RITIS, and again, going back to where is the congestion, when does it start, when does it alleviate? We were curious about bottlenecks, and RITIS has tools for visualizing and measuring bottlenecks. And then also, again, we had lots of folks out in the field on the day of. And so how was the data that we were seeing, on the big screens from our command center, how is that validating against the observations that we were seeing in the field? And the expectations also is that this would allow us to make some real-time decisions. I will get into that here in a little bit, because there were some pretty cool aha moments related to using these products. Next slide. So very simple here. These are the steps that we took. I've covered a bit of this already, but we really cued in on the travel time and speed dashboards within the RITIS-PDA suite, and the regional traffic explorer to a degree for those bottleneck rankings. So once we decided what those tools were going to be, we went back to our traffic modeling to let that inform us as to where we should set up these dashboards. For anyone who may not be familiar with the dashboards, you use the TMC segments that are available in RITIS, and you draw endpoints. So you're drawing a segment along a length of road, a start and stop, and then they're evaluating the travel times and the travel speeds at that location for that segment, and it's visualizing the live speeds and travel times based on historic averages for that same exact segment. So the way we decided to do this was we took our interstates and some of our more heavily traveled U.S. routes. We keyed in on those ones, again, going back to our traffic demand models and what that was telling us, so that we can envision, again, picture this on a big board, what the interstates look like, what our major corridors look like from exit to exit. So this is how we're going to paint this picture for a common operating picture. So we get into building our dashboards, and we did it strategically so that whenever someone was looking at the top of the screen on the dashboard, they knew that they were looking at the northernmost extent of the route we were speaking about. And then as you cascade down the screen, you knew that you were looking at the southern extent of that route, where it intersects with Massachusetts, where it intersects with New Hampshire, so that at a very quick glance, you had a very high level understanding of what was happening out there. So from here, we did train our stakeholders. We gave them an idea of what this was going to look like, put it in front of them so they could ask questions ahead of time. And then from there, we shared it with a wider group of stakeholders, folks at Vermont Emergency Management, who work closely with during these emergency type situations. And one thing I did want to mention here is that when you're building these dashboards, you can save yourself a whole lot of time for future work by saving the segments that you're creating. So you can save those segments from exit to exit to use them in a future dashboard or a different product within the PDA suite. And then similarly, it's a little tedious if you're building out an extensive dashboard. So what RITIS has allowed you to do now is share the dashboards that you build with the organization that you work for. So you can share those within RITIS to the domain or the agency that you work for, which is a major improvement, and allows other people to use the dashboards that someone else has already built. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick side by side here of the two tools that I mentioned. On the left, the Regional Explorer, which to be honest with you, we thought we were going to be using this a little bit more on the day of. In practice, we learned that the dashboard view, if you wanted specific details about a single queue or a single bottleneck, the Regional Explorer is great for that. But again, going back to it, another point that I made was there wasn't a whole lot we could do about the congestion except for wait for it to alleviate. So those details weren't extremely important to us at the time. So on the day of, we all sort of naturally migrated back towards the dashboards And again, relied on that for our common operating picture. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention we had a lot of other things going on besides RITIS on this day. We had 3 drone teams that were flying drones all day at, again, going back to our traffic modeling, our 3 busiest areas that we expected. And what we learned there, we were 2 for 3 on those assumptions, perhaps based on the cloudiness of the day, or again, we made assumptions during the traffic modeling that our most northwest drone team, which was in the St. Albans, Vermont area, it was a pretty slow day for them. The congestion never really built up that far northwest in our state, but we had a drone team in the Burlington area and then the White River Junction area around the I-91, I-89 interchange with New Hampshire. So again, this was just another way of validating what we were seeing in the dashboards, and we had video of it at the same time. Next slide, please. So the results were pretty exciting. Obviously a lot of these are, they're very generic. These are goals that we all have for steady state operations and crisis state operations. But this is not hyperbole, because we ended up making decisions based off from the dashboards and the information that we were seeing. As you can see on the right side here, this is Interstate 89. All the red and crimson means drastically slower traffic speeds than historical averages, greater travel time than historical averages. And then at the specific time of this screen grab, you can see here, the top right corner, you can see the green. So, as we're looking at this, we can literally just visualize the congestion alleviating from the north as cars begin to leave the state afterwards. So again, these labels that you're seeing here, each line is exit to exit. And I will also mention that you can't change the descriptors here. This is what it is based off the segmentation RITIS. But again, a whole lot of information here at a very quick glance that really tells you what's going on out there. And one of our lessons learned from this day, and an operational decision that was made in real time by our executive leadership, resulted around a minor fender bender northbound on Interstate 89 before the eclipse occurred. But it was on that Monday. It was probably the late morning hours, and a car went off the road. Everyone was safe. There was no life safety concerns. However, the Vermont State Police got a wrecker in there. They closed down the shoulder. They took a travel lane, and mind you, we only have 2 lanes of travel on Interstate 89. And the interstate travel speeds had decreased. They were slower, but they were not as bad as you're seeing here in this screen grab on the top right. But what happened, the aftermath of taking a lane for even just 20 or 30 minutes and making everyone use 1 lane, there was a massive ripple effect and a downstream effect in terms of what that did to congestion, which built up severely behind this incident and took hours to alleviate. And so at that point in time, the TMC, we informed the Transportation Incident Command Center, the commander, and of course they got on the phone with Vermont Emergency Management and our Vermont State Police and had this discussion at a very high level, again, because we had the data at our fingertips to show them exactly what happened as a result of them taking the lead. So in about 10 minutes time, there was a program change, a system-wide approach for that Monday of the eclipse, that we were not going to recover any vehicles unless absolutely necessary, and that we come back and get them at a later time. So that was a change that these dashboards allowed us to make. Similarly, after the event was over, again, mass exodus. It was like someone flipped a switch, at 3:30 in the afternoon. There was no cars on the interstate, or folks were just parked on the side of the interstate, observing the eclipse. And literally like someone flipped a switch. As soon as it's over, the whole southbound barrel just starts to stack up, and there's virtually nobody heading north. And as we're observing this into the evening, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., there were operational decisions that our decision makers were wondering, we still have a lot of folks out there on the road. And again, we're kind of just in this monitoring stage. So when do we send them home? They've had a long day already. How are we going to manage, our human resources for the remainder of this event? And so there's a really awesome observation that was made, which was basically, the whole, say, 80 miles of congestion up I-89. We had all of our district maintenance garages, they were all out in full force. So, they go, consider them being 20 miles apart on the interstate, if you will. So we had multiple districts garages deployed, when in reality, if something happened in that southbound barrel, it was going to be extremely difficult to get to because there was traffic everywhere. And it could take significant amount of time to go even 5 miles south. So the observation at the time was, why don't we just leave our southernmost garage out in the field? We can send everyone else home, because the reality was, even though they could have been 50 miles from any incident that may have occurred, they're going to be able to get there quicker than anybody north of that event would be able to get south to it. So alleviated some resources. We're able to send folks home. And that's an observation that I really don't think would have been made unless we were staring at this dashboard. Next slide, please. So the reactions were great. We had a lot of people that were tech savvy that were part of this activation and this response. We had some that were not. And I just remember one of our not so tech savvy leaders that was just gushing about this. They couldn't believe that we had this information. They couldn't believe how well it articulated what was going on. He was getting phone calls from the field to tell us about congestion, X, Y, or Z, and he's saying, "Yep, I'm already staring at it." Again, just going back to that validation piece, confirming what we were seeing on the screens was in fact what was happening in the field. And sort of take that one step further, what was really cool for us, and we've had this data for coming up on a year and a half now, and we're still sort of in this grassroots phase of telling our story, getting this information out there to our agency stakeholders, to other internal agencies in the state of Vermont, our partners, our consultants, people who do work on behalf of the state, and letting them know, hey, you all have access to this as well. This can help you do your job better, more efficiently. So this was just another opportunity, in real time, in the limelight, to tell the story of this data, let folks know what we've been working on, and get them excited about how it may help them in other phases of their work besides just this real-time operations. So as you can see here, there's a lot of great things to say, and people just really appreciated having that sort of segmented breakdown, the real values of speed and time versus just staring at a traffic heat map that just has colors on it. So a major improvement over just a traffic heat map. So in terms of having our common operating picture of just visualizing the congestion on our interstate system and on our busier US routes, border to border, exit to exit, quickly at a glance, we hit it out of the park, and everyone was very happy with the product that we put in front of them. Next slide, please. So this may go without saying, but we do use these dashboards in our everyday operations. It's not just applicable to these larger events. Again, when you're staring at a steady state status quo type of traffic day, you're going to see a lot of green on those dashboards. And when the colors start to change, which you notice just at a glance, green goes to yellow, goes to orange, goes to red, goes to crimson, it prompts you to start asking questions like, what's going on there? Is that just construction traffic? Is there an incident there that we haven't heard about yet? So it can cue you into making phone calls, discovering these incidents that perhaps you wouldn't have known about at all, or there would have been, you can close down that gap in notification in terms of how long it takes for someone else to tell you about that information. We're also going to expand these dashboards to other major collectors and other routes. Again, we sort of started at the highest level in terms of our traffic volume, so we're going to continue to build these out to lesser traveled roads, and to see how they can inform us on those roads as well. It also got me thinking, because of the operational procedural change of not recovering vehicles unless we absolutely have to. It makes me wonder about other traffic incident management practices during our steady state. We deal with a lot of snow that causes congestion, slower traffic speeds, and I know vehicle recovery can impact that as well. So can we use this and more at a programmatic level, change the way we do TIMS in the state of Vermont? I think there's potential for that as we do work closely with our stakeholders in the traffic incident management world. Then obviously going to continue to come to these RITIS workshops and see what I can learn from the rest of you folks that are also using these tools. Thank you for having me. That's what I had for you folks. Happy to take questions or answer questions as they come.
Appreciate that, Ryan. I think we'll go ahead and move to Greg just to keep the pace going. But I'd see a few, at least one question already in the Q&A box. So I may have you look at that, Ryan, and provide that separately. And of course, to the rest of the audience, if you're interested in asking questions, please go ahead and add those to the Q&A box so we can get those answered for you. But with that, I think we can go ahead and move on to Greg. Greg, if you're ready, you can take control.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Ryan. Let me know if my screen showing now?
Your screen is showing, yes.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you. This is a review with Trip Analytics, which is a post-mortem tool right now. It's not an operational as-you-go tool, but it does allow you to check afterwards what happened and compare it with your predictions ahead of time or for planning future events. However, I would like to interrupt this presentation with a personal eclipse story. And the reason I'm going to show it to you is because after it was over, I spotted this on the internet. A NASA astronaut took this photo of the shadow of the eclipse just as it was leaving Vermont and crossing New Brunswick in Canada. I guess that's Maine over on the right side. And why this was so interesting to me is that this thing's moving 1,500 miles an hour, but I was sitting with my wife and a few friends on the deck of a Airbnb in Prince Edward Island looking over the water. And we watched this thing come. And what we found out later, my iPhone, I took some photos, this edge of this shadow actually is visible in this photo that I took from that deck. And you can actually see that arc of the shadow comes in. Even though the sun looks like it's full there, this is literally seconds before totality. And then it went out like a light switch. But when I saw that shadow and I remembered this picture, I thought that was just a really cool thing. And I thought I would share it with you today. This is what it looked a few moments afterwards. The iPhone kind of blurred out the light there. That's more what it looked like. For those that haven't seen it, it's really cool. That's a little black dot from PowerPoint that I put over the top of it. This is a real photo I took with the 200 millimeter lens. And I actually got some of the sun activity around the side. So anyway, if you like more I'll return to the regularly scheduled program now. Totality was at 3:30 p.m. on April 8th. And the question we had looking at it is, where did the travelers arrive in Vermont and when did they come from where they came from? And so we decided to do an analysis during the Friday, Saturday, Sunday before totality. And then also, what about the day of totality right up till 3:30 p.m.? What if we just cut that down to noon to 3:30 p.m.? And then what about looking at just the last 90 minutes? So this is the data set we had to work with. This is a subset of real world trips, somewhere between 5 or 10% of the real world trips. Vermont, because it's not a big congested state, opted to have the version of the database that has the start and the endpoints of the trips, but not the pathways. So the tool can use pathways, or you can use it without pathways. You'll get all the trips in the data set that started inside Vermont and ended outside Vermont. You get the ones that started inside Vermont and ended inside Vermont. And you'll also get the trips that started outside and ended inside Vermont. What you won't get are trips that cut through, because this data set has to have an endpoint in the state of Vermont for it to be in the data set. The tool allows you to decide how you want to report the origins and destinations. The level of state, of course, that's a very broad, non-granular analysis. You can do by county, you can do by sub-county, traffic analysis zone, by zip code, or you can create a custom version, which is over here. And if you look at it closely, these are a bunch of regions that are right along the highways or right along the camping areas. And we thought we would take a look at the people who came and parked on the sides of the roadways. Where did they come and when did they arrive? And that's the purpose of what we created here. We created a Vermont totality study area, which is the northern, basically third or half of the state. The line of totality cut at a diagonal right across the state. And so we expected a lot of the activity to be along this line of totality. But Ryan was also mentioning that because of weather, we had some people that may have come into the state because of that. And we did see some of that in the data, which I'll show you in a moment. Once we have defined how we want to know origins and destinations, we then decided to use the study area as a spatial filter. So we're finding all trips that started outside of that spatial filter and ended inside. So these are the arrivals that are coming in. And then we do it at different time periods, like we said before. So the first report we ran was for the 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday prior to it, and all day long. And then for control, we went 1 week later on the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we ran it again so that we could show the contrast between a normal day and the day of the eclipse, or at least the period of the eclipse. So this first one is an analysis. This is the control, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a week later. The browns and reds are all the origin numbers. And notice that they're outside of the state. And the blues, I'm sorry, outside of the northern third of the state, and the blues are the inside, because that's what we surveyed for. We said we wanted them starting outside and ending inside. That's why we have all the origins around it and then the destinations inside it. So this is what it looked like during the control period. And if you look at the numbers, you've got a lot more. A lot of the numbers doubled, especially from the south side. A lot of them were pretty modest, but this is where you have the documentation of where the trips came during that weekend period before. If we contrast it with the actual day of the eclipse from midnight till 3:30 p.m., we have this normal day of what it looked like. And we have a few, peaks along here where the cities are, but this is what the eclipse affected looked like. So this is the impact. And for all of these, we have our counts and our ability to pick up the travel times and the splits of where they came from. How about roadside parking during that last 3.5 hours? This is where we substituted remember those custom zones I put along here? Well, we substituted and used that for reporting the zones. So here you have a zoom in. This is where 89 comes into totality. And this is a zoom in of those different zones. And you can actually get different numbers of vehicles that arrived here during the last 3.5 hours before totality. This is zooming out a little bit. This is the Montpelier area. If you then go ahead and look at the control, of course, there's not much going on in that 3.5 hour periods on a normal Monday, but on the day of the eclipse, this is the activity during the last 3.5 hours. So you see there's a lot of movement, but it's all close to the edge where you don't have totality. And then up in the corner of the state, you have a lot going on up there. And I wondered if that had something, maybe Ryan was talking about a weather forecast. I'm not sure, but that's the one place. Everywhere else, you didn't have much going on. If we zoom in to the Montpelier area, this is our control. And here are those little zones we talked about. And there's really not much going on in those. On the day of the eclipse, though, we've got actual samples. These are sample vehicles that are stopping either on the road or right off the road or in the local. The campground up here didn't show anything, but you've got this 23, this 12. You can actually click on those numbers and it'll show you where those came from. These are all, obviously they're close to the very edge, and it gives you a sense of the last minute travelers. You can also open this up as an OD matrix, by the way. These are the same numbers. They're just in a matrix format. This is the sample counts. And for any one of these, like this count of 27 that came from this zone to that zone, you get a breakdown of the 5th percentile travel time, the 50th percent travel time, and the 95th percentile travel time. And so in this case, you're having, was it 9 minutes and 15 seconds? These are the last 3.5 hours showing where these vehicles are coming from. You can also turn the matrix to show you the 50th percentile median travel times if you want, or any of the others. And there's that 9 hours and 15 minutes that we just saw a moment ago. Then we did a run. What about that last 90 minutes for totality? These are the really last minute travelers. Where are they coming from? Where are they going to? And we can see our distribution. And then I wanted to check a travel time for reasonableness because the tools is producing that for me. So I just randomly picked this one travel time, and I looked it up on the table, and it says the travel time is 53 minutes. Then I went over to Google to ask for directions from those 2 points on a normal period. I picked the middle of the zone. I just kind of took a stab at it, and it came up, and believe it or not, it came up at 53 minutes, which told me all I need to know. But it was nice to see that collaboration. So that's the presentation that I have. And if there's anything else or any questions that I can answer, happy to do that.
Appreciate that, Greg. So when's our next eclipse? That's a big question. How can we start using this for the next one?
I don't know if Vermont can use it, but somebody else can in terms of their planning. I think Barcelona can use it.
Well, certainly good insights. I think Ryan, Greg, in terms of that follow-up, that's great to have in terms of planning. You know, that trips piece was certainly one for the last eclipse, which I think was what, 2018-ish. That would have been, certainly would have been great insight to understand, that last little piece, as you were showing, where people were just trying to get to the edge of the eclipse so they could take it in totality and then scurried right back out. So appreciate that. I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A, but I think certainly if you have any, please feel free to add those in. Greg and the rest of us will continue to watch that Q&A box and provide answers. But Mr. Pack, I believe you're next up on our list. So I think I might start queuing you up to walk us through.
If you can stop sharing, whoever's sharing their screen, if they can stop it, I'll share mine.
Matt, would you still like to run the polls related to Greg's presentation?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do those. That'd be wonderful, Esther. So just some additional insight that would be helpful for us. We had some follow-up poll questions, and this is specific to TRIPS analytics. So the first one of those was, how would you describe your daily job function? Is it in planning, modeling, design, operations, or maintenance? The next portion was, if you've been using TRIPS analytics, once you've completed a query using that tool, do you need to end up doing additional processing time before you turn it in? Is it about 0 to 1 hours, 2 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 plus hours? And then NA would be that you don't really use the tool a whole lot. And then the final question that would certainly be helpful to us would be understanding what functionality would be helpful to you to reduce the additional processing time that you indicated in question 2. And I think, Esther, it might be helpful to leave that poll up since we do have that long form question going while Michael gets his presentation queued up and gets us introduced.
Sounds good to me.
And Michael, perhaps while we let people finish up their long form responses, you could give us some of those insights, your additional insights that you saw from RITIS and what was happening on the eclipse from your front.
Sure thing. So for those of you who were using RITIS during the eclipse, we had put a special layer on the RITIS real-time map that showed the path of totality and where the umbra was. And then we used RITIS to produce a time-lapse video of what the congestion looked like before, during, and after the eclipse. So there's a little clock that's running up in the upper left-hand corner. I'm just going to move this forward in time so we don't watch this for 5 minutes. But as the eclipse passes by everyone, you start to see the congestion in the path of totality, especially on the edges where people were trying to leave. You can see that pick up and get worse and worse and worse. And what's interesting is if you keep going late into the night, it continues to get worse. So here we are at 7:45 p.m. You can see up here in New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, and over here in Toronto, things are a complete mess, and they continue. We also used RITIS to go in and produce local time lapses in the trend maps tool to look at what was going on. This here is Pennsylvania, and this is a particular corridor. This interstate here is a corridor that a lot of people used to escape the eclipse or leave the eclipse afterwards. If I back up here around the 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, you can see a lot of traffic building up. And then later on afterwards, more traffic builds up in the evening. So you might wonder, is that normal? Is that abnormal? So we use the congestion scan tool, and we took a look at April 8th, the day of the eclipse. You can see the bulk of the congestion on this particular interstate going through Pennsylvania started around 4 p.m. And you can see it propagate and get worse and worse and worse. And it stays up until about midnight. And the actual queue backs up over 100 miles, about 110 miles down the road. And the southbound side, northbound, there's bad congestion, but it wasn't quite as bad as the southbound side. And so wondering if that is normal or abnormal, we then overlay in the congestion scan, we take a look at the prior Monday and compare that to the day of the eclipse, and then we look at the Monday after the eclipse, and we can see that in fact this is, of course, abnormal congestion. Not what you'd normally see on this particular stretch of the roadway. We are putting together other videos that take kind of a zoomed in view of certain areas where there was bad congestion. We are going to be making these videos live on our website here in the not too distant future, and you'll be able to play around with them and go forward and backwards in time as you want to explore them. So all that's going to be available. We just thought we'd show. We didn't have time to show this during the last user group meeting, so there you go. And with that, I think it is time to turn things back over to Bob.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Yep, great. Okay. All right. RITIS Enhancement Group Working Group updates. As many of you know, our enhancement group, we work closely with the CATT lab to prioritize improvements and additional features. We provide some of the funding and share information, and we meet probably quarterly on average. We got another meeting coming up pretty soon. So we wanted to today just go over some of the recent features that have been completed. I'll just summarize them, and Michael, as always, feel free to jump in with additional details. This list here is what's been accomplished recently. We've gone over some of these other things in previous meetings. So and we can answer questions on any of these if people have specific questions. But let's go ahead and look at each one that we've completed recently. And thanks very much to Michael and his team. They've done a lot of work on this. First is API enhancements for XD segments. These are for programmers and developers that don't necessarily need the RITIS user interface because they have their own tools and applications. And this was all possible because the CATT lab had upgraded to a new API. So that is done. So that's good news there. And what do we have next here? Downloadable volumes. So in the PDA suite, you can now choose from available volumes, whether it's from INRIX or your own DOT if you've supplied those to the CATT lab, or NPM RDS you can see there. And you can download these into a file for additional analyses. But remember, the CATT lab always needs volumes from everybody, from every state, annually if possible. So keep those volumes coming in. Next, let's see, weather data in congestion scans. Now you can overlay this weather data so you can see any correlation between weather events and increased congestion. So that is deployed and available now.
Something about this real quick?
Yes, please do.
So when you run a congestion scan now, if you look in the dead center above the lane diagram, there's a drop down for data type. If you select that, you can switch over to weather, and you can look at weather by itself, or you can look at weather with the congestion at the same time. But it's all accessible from that drop down right there. Sorry, Bob.
Excellent. No, excellent. That's great. Okay, next, mirroring of HD segment selections. This builds on the improvements for the route selection, where you can now go in and pick the endpoints of roads rather than having to type in a road or search for it. And you can actually build a route. And this is specifically for INRIX segments. And now it will, when you build a route, it will automatically choose the reverse direction, which is a great feature. One that MassDOT had hoped would happen actually. So we're very happy about that. Next is the in progress. You've made a lot of progress recently. This is the best practices handbook in RITIS. It builds on Oregon's best practices. And some of you, if you remember, we may have seen a presentation on this earlier in earlier meetings. Here's just some sample pages, right, Michael, that you've put together. This one's good on the traffic map because you can see just only where congestion is occurring. Sometimes all the greens there make it a little muddled. So that's a nice feature and description there. Same with the congestion scan. Of course, you can go into RITIS and you can see a lot of these tutorials, but people have expressed a need to have this in kind of a book and a manual. So this is well on the way. Michael, you say it's in progress. What if you had to give a percent completion on it? What would you say?
It's about 90% complete. This will get deployed in August.
Excellent. Okay, that is great news. That's I think that's going to be really useful for everybody. Here's another 90% in progress. Safety data, the safety analytics. This has been a big effort and very complicated too in drawing from crash records from different jurisdictions and trying to get uniformity, the different police reports and so forth. You've got just some sample pages there. You can filter by all sorts of different events. You can choose all these individually, right? Or all as a group, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really just getting into more details, being able to query more. This is all going to be a part of the event query tool. This will be deployed. The first phase of this will be deployed next week. So log
Excellent.
in late
Okay.
next week and you'll be able to see this. Now, this is just the first phase of this particular piece of work. Phase 2 will happen later this year, and that's where you'll start to see more of the visualizations, including incident diagrams like we're showing down here in the lower right, or crash summary reports, or intersection hotspot visualizations, all sorts of other cool tools. But the basics of querying and being able to explore the data in a table are going to be rolled out next week.
Okay, great. And did you just see, before we go on to work zone, did you see the question from Matt about what jurisdiction, how far back does this data go?
Oh,
Or
so
does it vary? Does it vary by state or what?
Yeah, so probably a year ago, we started reaching out to agencies and asking them to give us their police crash data.
Right.
So whatever your agency gave us, that's how far back it'll go. If you don't see your agency's police crash data and you have it, just reach out. We'll stick it in here. It doesn't cost anything extra if you're already a RITIS subscriber. So just get us your data and we'll put it in here for you.
Excellent. Okay. Automated work zone reporting. This is there's several new templates that have been deployed. Pulling in.
Well,
No, not yet.
So this is the big piece of work that the enhancement group decided they wanted us to focus on this coming year. This is big. So the concept here, these are all the final designs, or the near final designs, is that you'd select a work zone from the RITIS website, or from the event query tool, wherever or the work zone performance management application, wherever your work zones are, you select them, and it takes you to this screen right here, where you then make sure you define the geography of the work zone appropriately. And if we don't have information about the days of the week that it's active or whatnot, you'd select those, and you'd hit this generate report button. And what then pops out are a series of 4 or 5 reports that tell you, here's what happened with that work zone during the last week or yesterday, whatever date range you want. But it automatically puts all this together without you having to click a whole bunch of buttons. And the cool thing is you can come in and you can set what your agency's goals are. So let's say you wanted to keep the miles of congestion or the speed and travel times below some sort of threshold. You type those things in, and then it tells you for, yesterday or last week or whatever, did you meet the goal or not? If so, by, what percentage of the time did you meet the goal? And this is just one example. If you scroll down, then there's other visualizations that pop up that show you things like what's the queue duration and length. So this is like a timeline right here. The blue section is when your work zone was active and which lanes were blocked. And we show you the queues that are building up while the work zone is active for each day of the week, when the congestion exists and how bad it is. We do another version where it's just all of the congestion scans throughout the work zone. We show you where the work zone physically is on the roadway between these dashed lines right here. We're even trying to show you whether or not it was raining or snowing, or if there were crashes that existed when the work zone was active or not. It's just another version of showing you the queue length different view. The user delay cost throughout the prior week and the vehicle hours of delay that existed throughout the work zone. And then the last one here is just a timeline showing you each of the prior 5 days or whatever many days you selected. And each graph shows you the miles of congestion, the speed, the average travel time delay, the temperature, and or the precipitation, and the crashes and events that happened. And we show you the date that you selected. So let's say you want to look at May 12th through the 16th, but you want to compare that week to some other week. Maybe it's pre-construction or something like that. And so you then get to compare if things are getting better or worse as the construction project is being managed. So the idea is, this is something you could run every single day, and you could see what yesterday was like or the week before or what have you. This tool is going to take a while. This is not something that's going to be done in a few months. And in fact, we've not received enough funding from the enhancement group yet to finish this all the way. So we'll see how far we can get with the funding that we've got. But this is what everyone voted on as their favorite thing.
Right. Yeah. And this is a great preview of what can be done, especially if we get more funding. So, and this reflects we had a separate work zone performance working group, and that this reflects a lot of the input from that group. So, well done, Michael, and your team who put this together so far.
Thank you.
I think is that all we have for the quick update today? I think it is. Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, Bob, it looked like we had quite a few in the chat. Go ahead.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Yeah. So the first one up was, will FDOT get the updated safety data, and will the API function allow that? Same for TxDOT and RTC Nevada.
So TxDOT does not fund RITIS yet. They just fund the Pro Data Analytics Suite, so it's not going to work in Texas. But for Florida, as long as Florida gives us their safety data, and I cannot remember if they did or not, have to go back and look. But if they get it to us, then sure, it'll work just fine.
Next up was, does the work zone reporting use work zone data exchange?
So it's going to use whatever the agency uses to get us their work zone data. So in some cases, some agencies will be using the work zone data exchange. Other agencies will just give us, a description of their work zone. It might be a point location, and then that's why the interface gives you the ability to expand and modify the geography when you go into to generate a report. So both yes and no is the answer to that question.
All right, next up was, will we be allowed to download work zone data or use an API similar to the PDA API and Events API?
Yeah, so if you're a full RITIS subscriber, you can use the event query tool to access work zone data. And there is an API built into RITIS that allows you to directly query both real-time and historic event and work zone data and access that programmatically.
And then could you speak to any future developments on the available APIs just kind of at large?
Like just in general what we're doing or what's available?
Yes. Yeah. What's coming up? What are you all working on?
So there's with respect to incidents and events, work zones, speed data, all of that is what it is. We try as best we can to mimic all of the capabilities that are in the analytics tools within the API. Sometimes we might fall a little short, and let us know if that's the case. but that's what we strive for. There is some new stuff that we're working on that's still probably 6 to 9 months away, where we're leveraging dash cam video from trucks and other vehicles to be able to give you like virtual CCTV cameras out in the field, or to automatically detect crashes and work zone locations and other stuff from the processing of images. I can probably give a presentation on that work during the next RITIS user group, and that will have some API capabilities as well. That's some pretty neat new futuristic functionality.
Kay, I think you asked this question before Michael got to, or excuse me, Bob got to this last slide, but there was a comment about for work zones, temperature would also be helpful. And I think as we can see here,
it's in there. Yeah,
that is available. So
Yep,
that's great input.
Yeah, now it is not going to be a direct surface temperature measurement because we don't have that everywhere. That's only available where RWIS stations are, and there's not a ton of those out there. But we will be trying to do at least ambient air temperature.
And then the final question that we had, is it possible to include different work zone activities and types along with what you are doing currently, like maintenance, utility, construction, and others?
As long as the agency is providing that level of detail to us, we can then pass that along. Not every agency does that. Some keep it relatively generic. If you want to write to me specifically about a particular agency, we can look into what we're doing or not doing with that agency. Just send me an email.
Very good. And Kay, I think if you have any additional feedback, looks like you have a few additional thoughts as it relates to roadway temperature and ambient temperature. That might be good to just circle up with Michael and his team to just work through and see what additional data your team may have to be able to provide to RITIS. With that, Michael, I think we may have shifted some things around, but did you have some information that you were planning on presenting about just updates or general bug fixes, updates that were going on with RITIS, or perhaps I misunderstood?
So the big updates are all the things we just went over with the enhancement group. We've really been focusing on that here for the last few months because the end of June was our deadline for getting most of this stuff rolled out. So it's been all hands on deck for that. There have of course been many bug fixes. If you want to know more about those bugs that have been fixed, on the RITIS website and on the Probe Data Analytics website, there is a link that it either says release notes or what's new. And if you click on the release notes or the what's new, then you can scroll through and you can look at everything that we've fixed and deployed. We try to do a pretty good job of documenting all of that there. A lot of the big bug fixes might not even make sense to many people because maybe you never experienced it or wasn't something you dealt with. But there's a pretty good list there.
Very good. Well, I think that brings us to the last portion of our user group meeting. And it's the user feedback session, Q&A, and overall wrap up. So I think do we have one or two more polls and open mic questions? We do, yes. So we'll go ahead and bring these up. Two more polls for conversation. What kind of things are you currently doing with RITIS? Planning and ops, presentations, project funding, justifications that you'd be willing to share at a future meeting? And then our next question, is there any topic you would like to see added to a future user group meeting?
While everyone is answering that, it looks like Jason Wu has a question. Jason, you may unmute yourself.
Sorry, I may have pressed the wrong button.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay. But
And Michael, while the group is finishing those, it looks like there was one more question that popped up about work zones in the chat. Work zones are very dynamic. How do you suggest we can use the metrics if we want to have a baseline and compare it to a major MOT shift period?
Yeah, so you'll be able to dynamically select what you want that baseline period to be. So your baseline period could be any date range that you select. It could be pre-construction, or it could be comparing one phase of the construction to another phase. You get to select that. And if the geography of your work zone is changing, maybe it's mobile in some way, or it moves a little bit here and there, then you will have the capability within the user interface to change that geography as well. I didn't go over that in detail. I was worried we wouldn't have enough time, but there's like 10 or 15 slides just for how to select the geography and the date ranges. Good question.
And Esther, how much additional time would you like to provide on these two polls?
I think another 30 seconds should be good.
Very good.
And then I just will remind folks that if you are interested in having more of a voice in what it is that we work on or don't work on, please reach out to Bob Frey and MassDOT. He leads the RITIS enhancement group, and he'll talk to you more about how you can get involved and how the group works and everything. You don't have to be a contributor of funding to be a part of that group. We want you to be a contributor,
Right.
but you don't have to. You just have to have an interest in some good ideas.
Exactly. And I've talked to a few of you out there before. We have some ongoing conversations, and yeah, we welcome everyone's input, but frankly, you will have a louder voice if you have some money behind your voice and your agency.
And speaking of loud voices, if anyone wants to complain or ask us to build in some new features or functionality, now is the time to do that. Either in the agency input thing just disappeared, but you can type out complaints in the chat, or you can raise your hand and ask to be unmuted. Don't be shy. This is where we get better. And if you don't have anything to suggest or complain about, I'm assuming we're getting close to the end here, Matt.
We are. I think that this is we're closing in on the tail end, so I get to do the wrap up. We'll certainly digest that feedback that was received in that previous poll. It looks like we might have one more question. And Jason, perhaps you can come off mute and provide a little bit more input, but you indicated hazmat placards. Is that something that you're hoping to see in the incident data, or perhaps somewhere else?
Saw Jason on mute for a second.
Yeah, I did too. There you go.
Yeah, technical difficulties. Can you guys hear me?
We can, yeah.
So we use it for commodity flow study at the beginning, but we've been continuing to use it just so we know what kind of trucks are coming across with what kind of hazards. The cameras that we're using, or that we're viewing, the placards are usually not clear enough to where we can get the numbers.
Which agency were you looking?
We go through the RITIS thing, we log in. There's a bridge just south of the county we work in. And then we log into that and look at the cameras for the Harry Nice Bridge in Maryland.
Oh, okay. So we're talking about Maryland and Virginia area. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So some of those cameras are They use some pretty heavy compression before we get access to them. That said, there might be some weigh in motion stations near there. Those might have I think we're installing higher quality cameras on those that might be able to collect some of that information that you're interested in. So let's talk offline about what might be doable there.
Okay.
Very good. We appreciate that comment and question, Jason.
Yeah.
And certainly to others, again, feel free to provide your feedback. We know that the polling session ended, but that does not mean that you can't provide those thoughts, comments, questions, quibbles, concerns, quandaries to Michael and the RITIS support team directly. You can do that at support@ritis.org. If you haven't reached out to them, they're one of the best user support groups that you will find out there. Very responsive. I think Michael and team usually get you a response back within an hour. It's usually pretty well fleshed out. So certainly recommend that you reach out to them as needed. And of course, if you're a member of the coalition, Cheryl and team within the coalition, love to hear your feedback, not just about what's going on with RITIS, PDA Suite, and Trip Analytics, but certainly just the challenges at large that you're looking to solve. Please reach out to them. And again, thank you for showing up. This group continues to grow larger every single month, every single quarter. It looked like we capped out somewhere around 140 to 150 participants this go around, with well north of 200 having registered previously. So thank you as always. Look forward to seeing you in about 3 months. Until then, please, of course, feel free to reach out. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, everyone.